It was Trans Visibility Day this week here in America, and boy, it's about time because I don't know about you, but I don't see enough trans people. They just aren't visible enough for me. That said, Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire testified before a committee in Sacramento, California, about policies having to do with allowing men who identify as women into the private, personal spaces of young girls in public facilities. This includes 14-year-old, 13-year-old girls who are changing for their physical education class in a public high school. A biological male who identifies as female could be changing and getting naked right next to that little girl, and that little girl is forced to get naked in front of that man. That seems wrong to most Americans. And Matt Walsh confronted these lawmakers with it, and he confronted them with something that they could not deny, debate, or refute. He confronted them with the power of the truth.
Today, I'm not going to talk about fairness, although it's certainly true that allowing men to compete in women's sports is deeply unfair. And I'm not going to talk about safety, although it's certainly true that allowing men into female sports teams and into their bathrooms is incredibly unsafe. I'll let others highlight those important points. I want to talk about something even more important and even more basic. It's the most basic thing of all. It's truth. You must keep men out of women's sports and out of their facilities for the simple reason that they are men. Men are not women. A man who claims he is a woman is still not a woman. So why shouldn't men play in women's sports? Because they aren't women. It isn't true. We should not allow men into women's sports for the same reason we shouldn't go around claiming that 2 + 2 = 7. It's just not true. It is a lie. The man who identifies as a woman is either deluded and confused, or he is a cross-dressing fetishist looking to play out his fantasies in public. In either case, the claim that he's making, the claim to womanhood, is not true. And compelling women to take part in this untruth is evil, perverse, and predatory. If you would use the force of law to compel young girls to use a changing room with a boy, you are yourselves predators. Transgenderism is a lie. It is, in fact, the most deranged lie that mankind has ever invented. In a free country, nobody should ever be forced to participate in a lie. As lawmakers, you have an obligation to the truth. It is a truth that I know you all recognize because every human who has ever lived on earth recognizes it, that men are men and women are women. It is that simple. And the question before you is just as simple. The question is this: will you side with the truth, a truth so basic that every toddler understands it, or will you disgrace yourselves by denying it? That is your choice to make.
I wish Matt Walsh were holding a mic because he could have dropped it at that moment. This is a bill that was proposed before the California State Assembly, dominated by one party, the Democrats. As you can see, it's Assembly Bill 844. It has to do with educational equity. But this was proposed by a Republican who said that boys' spaces and girls' spaces should be exclusive and private and secured. And that includes transgender individuals not being able to invade those spaces. I'll cut to the chase. Democrats killed it. Democrats killed the bill that was proposed by Republicans. So they, of course, remember when Gavin Newsom said, oh, yeah, this is a problem. The transgender boys competing against girls in sports and all that stuff. And he said, yeah, but he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. He told Charlie Kirk he disagrees. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's not fair. What did he do? He did nothing. He did nothing. And so this insanity will continue in the state of California. And I use the term insanity advisedly because, as you just heard from Matt Walsh, there is some mental illness going on here. That's a big component into what we're seeing push down our throats here with regard to all of these policies and all of this advocacy and Trans Day of Visibility. Because, well, you know what? I'll just sit back and let you watch this presentation at the National Mall on Capitol Hill for Trans Visibility Day, and then we'll discuss.
But as I've watched my trans loved ones come into their own truths, it was as if I went from perceiving only primary colors to a whole rainbow of subtle shades. From seeing flat images to looking at the world in 4D. And I released so much of the need to define myself against someone else's measuring stick. And I was able to embrace aspects of who I truly was that I had beaten into submission. To know a trans person is to know someone who has taken a Herculean journey to overpower these assumptions. Someone who has experienced profound inner and outer doubt, and they have triumphed. Their very existence in this world is a miracle of self-definition, and as a result, my trans loved ones are the wisest, funniest, and most embodied people that I have ever known. So if these words reach just one teenager who wonders if they've been abandoned by cis people after the most recent election, or one trans person struggling to remember how loved they are, I will have done my whole job. So we love you, we see you, we bow down to your charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent. And we are so lucky to love you and to fight with you and for you, to learn from you, and to ensure that our rights are inseparable from yours. Trans lives don't just matter. They transform the world into a place of possibility, joy, and discovery. Trans liberation is our liberation, and without it, none of us are free. Thank you all so much.
Now, is that really who I think it is, Kevin McMahon? Because I know who this has been identified as, but boy, howdy. Is that really her?
You know, I think so, but this person has changed their appearance so many times.
That's true. Well, this person has been identified by Breitbart News with this video as Lena Dunham. Actress Lena Dunham. And you know, I do see it. I do see it there. Either way, whew, the content of that speech just now, if you listen to some of the remarkable turns of phrase utilized in that speech, you heard psychobabble tropes that usually reside within a psychotherapist's office. There is such an obvious psychological component to those who align themselves with the TQ plus part of LGB that it cannot be denied, and yet we are forced to deny it at all times. In fact, if we raise it and say, perhaps if you truly do believe that there's something inside of you that tells you that you are somebody else who is trapped in the body that you currently occupy, that might not be some sort of normal thing. Perhaps you're fighting some mental illness issues. You are canceled. You are, well, up until a couple of years ago, would be censored on this very platform you're watching us on, unless you're watching on Rumble. But the mental illness component of this is so obvious and is being neglected. Sacrificed at the altar of gender-affirming care, which, by the way, I'm all for gender-affirming care. It just turns out that what I mean by gender-affirming care is the exact opposite of what these people mean by gender-affirming care. But back to what Matt Walsh had to say, which is to force these issues upon our society writ large and on each individual in the society, to force you to acknowledge something that goes against every basic instinct that you have, that you were born with, that you recognized when you were a child, to force you to adopt your language to accommodate this dementia, to force our society to accept this small fragment of individuals and rewrite all of our basic societal, cultural, and religious norms, all to keep the peace, and to manipulate us into thinking that if we don't accept what is not true, if we don't accept this lie and pretend that it's true, that we are somehow contributing to suicidal tendencies of people who already, obviously, as we've already stated, have mental health issues. It is abhorrent. It is outrageous. It is the opposite of freedom and independence. It is un-American, and it goes against the basic understanding of being a free-thinking human being. But let me just take it one step further, if I may. Everything I just laid out for you with regard to the transgender ideology and advocacy and activism and how to rewrite the basic societal norms that we all know and expect and accept already from birth. We don't have to be told that boys and girls are different. We don't have to be told what makes a boy and what makes a girl. You know that. It's inherent. But everything I just said about that, I could also say about the distinction between communism and capitalism, free market beliefs and socialist beliefs. We all know the basic principles of supply and demand. It's obvious. It's self-evident. We all understand that individuals having freedom and control over their own destiny is always superior to a tiny group of people making rules that they inflict on the rest of us to try to centrally control how we live our lives and how our economy is to be run. But what we're seeing with the transgender movement is cultural Marxism, and it can be held up right side by side with economic Marxism, because economic Marxism goes against every principle and every instinct that human beings are born with. You want more money, you want to achieve, you want to earn more, you go for it, you do whatever you can, right? But socialism keeps you from doing that. They want you to accept a girl as a boy and a boy as a girl, because the second you accept that, the second you put down your barriers, you put down your walls, you just sigh and say, okay, fine, stop bothering me. I'll use your pronouns, okay? I just want to keep the peace. The second you're willing to do that, then you're acquiescing to everything else the Marxists want. That's why they're so adamant about this. It's why they're insistent on it, and it's why they won't let it go. Because the second they continue down this path, even at the expense of our children, then they've won. Then at that point, what is your objection to economic principles? If you're willing to give on something this basic and fundamental and self-evident, then you're willing to give on anything. And that's why we hold the line. And that's why Matt Walsh did such a great job. And that's why Lena Dunham, if that's really her or them, well, that's the face and voice of the woke left in America. And it's why we're sticking together and fighting against it every single day.